Okay, Don, would you like to go ahead and start sharing your screen, sir?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm just getting it up here. All right. Thank you very much, Sandy.
Okay, so I'm sorry,
Okay.
let me just go ahead and just share with our attendees real quick. So welcome and thank you for joining the Deficiencies and Opportunities for Wireless 911 Call Routing. My name is Sandy Dyer. I'm with the DataMark team, and I'll be moderating today's session. Before we begin, I just want to let everybody know that we are recording this webinar and all attendees are muted for quality assurance purposes and for video viewing at a later time. So you should anticipate receiving the video. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A or the chat portion of this platform, and we will answer them throughout the presentation. I'd like to introduce our presenter for today's session. Please join me in welcoming Don Mitchell. He's the founder and CEO of NG911 Services. Don, can you share a little bit about yourself, please, sir?
Yes, thank you, Sandy. Thank you, DataMark. And what a great commercial that was from CCS. That was like I wanted to watch the whole movie. But we have to move on to deficiencies and opportunities in wireless 911 call routing. Thank you for joining me. I am joining from Cincinnati this week. We are in the over the Rhine area, if you are familiar with that area. My name's Don Mitchell. I'm the co-founder, CEO of NG911 Services, a company I co-founded with my wife, Kathleen, a little bit over 2 years ago. I have 24 years in public safety, mostly around call routing in wireless voice over IP, text to 911, and NG 911. Spent a number of years with really one company with 3 names, Zypoint, TCS, and now Comtech SST. And it's great to be doing this conference with you on National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. So welcome all of the great first responders, the essential workers. GIS is a very important topic, and we're going to hit that from a wireless 911 perspective. It's been a number of years ago, 1997 actually, the fall of 97, when I entered this great field of public safety, where I was privileged to work with Mike Hilbert in Allentown, Pennsylvania. We did our first phase 1 911 calls from there. And I listened to far too much Billy Joel, but that's another story. So what are we going to cover today? I'm going to get a bit of background. We're going to talk about how do these calls get to the PSAP and some history there. What are the current deficiencies? The headline that many of us have seen, why can Uber find me and 911 can't? I will give my take on that. And then we'll wrap up with what are the opportunities for improvement. We will have questions taken midway through the presentation, so I'll pause there. Sandy will take your questions and feed as many as she can to me with the time we have. And then there will be a Q&A at the end of the presentation as well. So here we go. Bit of background, most of you are aware of these things. We live in a world where almost everyone has a wireless phone. Many of us have 2. And in the most recent statistics, of the 240 million annual calls to 911, about 80% or 192 million were from wireless phones. The issue that we are going to talk about today is that the ATTIS study, which I'll give you a reference later, but a bit over a year ago, APCO did a great study using some data from ATTIS that 12% or 25 million calls are transferred or rerouted. That is the focus of the conversation with you today. So we're going to cover how do these calls get to the PSAP. The early days of wireless phones, and I actually had access to a phone like that, but that's back in the days where it wasn't really a personal phone. I would check it out from my division when I needed it and carry it around. And wow, that thing had some coverage. I could be in the basement of a building and still make a phone call. The big old Motorola brick. But in those days, the wireless phones are being sold a lot as throw a phone in your glove box for an emergency. That was back in the day. We referred to it now as wireless phase 0 service, where the 911 calls from those wireless phones went to a 10-digit number, didn't come in through the call handling, like through the selective router via 911, the way normally. So if you had an enhanced system, you wouldn't get anything at your screen. No location data, no phone number. And many times the calls for a state all went to one location, like a highway patrol. And when the callers couldn't really communicate accurately their location, these like call answers are in a spot where they can't understand the landmarks that the callers were describing, and there were many tragedies. That led to the FCC working with the wireless carriers, CTIA, public safety like NENA and APCO, and generated what's known as the FCC Report and Order 94-102, which was effective April 1st, 1998. What the first step of that order designated was that wireless 911 calls needed to be routed to a pre-assigned PSAP based on the sector, that the caller's phone number needed to be displayed on the telecommunicator's screen, and that there was a general description of the location of the caller, like Hyde Park, Crossroads Mall, something like that. When phase 2 was implemented years later, it was not a routing requirement. It was a dispatch location requirement, and we will talk more about that later. What is on the screen there, which I won't read, is the initial accuracy back in the initial order. I know that there's been updates to the accuracy requirements since then, but I wanted you to at least see the original. Many of your friends, when you talk to them and tell them what you do, and they talk about their calling from their wireless phone, well, don't they know where I am? Doesn't the call get to the center based on my location? No. Still, for the most part, and we'll talk about the advances in that section of what's happening to improve that, but handset location has not been used except for consumer applications. 911 still is using, for the most part, pre-assigned sector-based routing. And that routing is done by a routing key referred to as an emergency services routing key. I had to at least throw in some lingo and abbreviation there. And then this is for all of you who love law or have some insomnia. You can curl up with the Code of Federal Regulations. But I wanted to provide a reference of why things are the way they are. So this is the Code of Federal Regulations. This came about because of the FCC report and order. So it's in Part 9 here. The top one talking about the requirement of transmitting 911 calls to a designated PSAP, an answering point, and then the next bullet is really the reason for the 9 months. Many of you might know that when you request service, even for today, I believe that they use the 9 months even for text to 911. But for wireless 911 service, we had that 9 month, and this is where that ruling came from. And what are the current deficiencies? As I talked about, we're going to focus on the transfer issues that come across, especially across state boundaries. The picture up there shows a somewhat common occurrence where there's a state boundary, and in this example, you have 911 calls that get answered in Washington for people in Oregon, or in Oregon for Washington. And while, of course, all the agencies work well together, if the caller can't really describe where they are, all of that mechanism and work to be able to transfer a call quickly isn't going to help until you actually know where the caller is. Many people will refer to these as misroutes, and they really aren't misroutes technically, because the system is doing what it needs to do, what it's been asked to do. It's routing based on the sector that the call came from. And this is why we will say that location-based routing is essential to reducing transfers. Here's that APCO blog post from Mark Reddish. I believe that this, in the recording, you'll get the link here, and but this is a great article from Mark. Appreciate him writing that up. Lots of great statistics about the problem and the scope of it. Another benefit, and this is a promise of NG911, to answer calls based on caller location, and we are getting there. Location-based routing is also essential for incident management. And incident management is an interesting issue. You have calls from people themselves who need help, calls from people who are alongside someone who needs help, people driving by and seeing the accident, if it's an accident, or if it's like a flood or a tornado, you might have people from around the area calling 911 to ask for information. And I know in listening to the after action review for the Houston flooding from a few years ago, they were receiving 911 calls from well-meaning people wanting to offer assistance, to offer their boats for service. So having some sense of where people are calling from can really help, is really essential for incident management. It is certainly a promise of NG911. The good news is that we are getting there. And then lastly, the costs. Many of you are focused on GIS. We applaud you. It is necessary to move away from or exit the legacy. Legacy creates complex combinations of legacy and NG911, is creating longer implementations, duplicate contracts, etc. So, and I'm looking at the clock. I'm deciding that I can go ahead and insert my level of humor. So bear with me. So I'm in the Midwest today, which is close to my home. I grew up in Wisconsin area, up in the Appleton area, actually. Now I won't tell the joke because it's such a groaner, and it's a perfect dad joke. But later on, you'll see an email address that you can ask me for the joke if you really want to hear it. It is a great dad joke. All I will tell you is that there's a city up near Green Bay, and it is called De Pere. And so the joke is around the city of De Pere. Nothing bad, just it's a dad joke. So if you'd like to hear, I'm happy to share that with you. But for the sake of everyone here, because I respect you, I won't share it now, even though I used up all that time. So I think we're at a place where we can ask questions. So I guess, Sandy, are there any questions, or I guess we will pause. I'm going to take a sip of water.
No, nothing's come in yet.
All right, I'll just give it another minute. All right, excellent. And I do want to recognize Liz, who is doing a great job. We're really happy to have her providing ASL services to make sure that this presentation is accessible for everyone. Thank you, Liz. Our next section, which is a lot of fun, why can Uber find me and 911 can't? So with Uber, like many consumer services today, you can just flip your smartphone open, request an Uber, shows where you are, shows where the pickup points are, and it just all works pretty straightforward. And you can kind of move yourself, refine your location on the map, a lot of great things. So the average consumer thinks, well, if I can do that, why can't 911 find me? And there's lots of detailed stuff, but the simple thing is basically we are not using handset location yet across the whole country. And Uber is using the handset location, a lot of great data that has been developed and crowdsourced by Google and others to get that location. So
Don?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to. So right after you started again, we had 2 questions come in.
Oh, okay, so that's fine.
Do you want to finish your thought on this slide, and then I'll toss them your way?
I'll take them right now. It's a good break point.
Okay. Well, so now we have 3.
All right.
The first one, and I'll couple this together because it comes from the same inquiry. Wireless is based on sectors. Is that correct?
Yes.
Will we be using handset location for 911? And I'll toss in there, if not now, when?
And that is a great segue, because the answer is yes. That's actually my next bullet there. A is that we certainly applaud, and all of us should applaud the efforts by T-Mobile, who has recently announced that they are doing 911 call routing by location. Very exciting. They're doing it on the origination side, but that data then will certainly feed into NG 911 systems and really deliver that final promise of routing by location for both the regular calls and incidents. So very exciting. Look for their press announcements. They are up and running in Washington and parts of Texas. So hug your T-Mobile person today.
Wow. Okay. So for clarification, T-Mobile's doing it as part of their call collection, and will route based on location once your next generation 911. But even though it's originating with them, if it's a legacy network, it still has to work within the legacy means.
They are choosing, so the 911 systems on the origination side, so the way that it works today has been that the ESRK, or basically the destination PSAP is selected based on the sector. And so what T-Mobile is doing is picking that destination PSAP by the location of the caller, and a bunch of stuff that even if I knew it, I couldn't share it, which I don't know. But you certainly ask them. The good news there is that because they have that location, even though they're picking the destination PSAP, which is the way it works today, with NG911, the promise there is giving control to the state, county, where they can, based on incidents or whatever reasons, they can use that location that T-Mobile is providing, and they could change that destination PSAP based on PSAP unavailability or incident. So hopefully that answers the question.
I believe so. I have two more. Do you want me to hold on to them, or would?
No, this is great. I think we're a little bit ahead of time, but so I think we're good. So
the first one is, how does the Ray-Baum Act affect remote workers using voice over IP or wireless?
I can't speak to Ray-Baum when you're using voice over IP. I sort of know it. It's great. Certainly Carey's Law and Ray-Baum are essential, especially like when I'm traveling and in a hotel. I know that I can get to 911 without messing around with the phone too much. But if you are a remote worker using your wireless phone, if it is connected back to your company's PBX, you'll need to make sure you understand how 911 works in that situation. Otherwise, if you're using a wireless phone at home, many of us, including me, I have Wi-Fi calling, and you need to make sure that your address for Wi-Fi calling is set correctly. Otherwise, if it's not on Wi-Fi calling, it will work the way it always has worked by sector. Does that help?
Yes. And voice over Wi-Fi is a whole different discussion, so we won't go into that for sure. So I know you're not a Rapid SOS or Rapid Deploy representative, but the question is, Rapid SOS and Rapid Deploy using different information, are Rapid SOS and Rapid Deploy using different information than wireless phase 2?
Rapid SOS and Rapid Deploy, we're huge fans. We applaud what they are doing. Both of them are doing what I'll refer to later as a location for dispatch, which is very essential. That's the location for dispatch is making sure that the field first responders, police, fire, medical, get to the caller or whomever needs services. What we're talking about here is location for routing, and it's a different thing. So what Rapid SOS and Rapid Deploy are doing, which is a great job, is solving that, finding the person who called 911 much more accurately, much more quickly. They're using, I don't know all the details of what they're using, but I know that it's a combination of Google services and Apple services with some sort of clearinghouse. They would have to explain the details of that.
Correct. Okay. Okay, so I was wrong. I have two more, and then I'm gonna cut it off, and we'll let you go ahead and continue.
Yeah, no, this is great.
The question, well, this tells you that folks need to, there's a desire to understand, right? You're providing a valuable service right now. So the question is, are they just routing to a PSAP by location, or can they also see the caller's location? And I think they're referring to T-Mobile.
For T-Mobile, they are routing by location. I can't speak to how fast that location shows up on their screen, and I would have to refer that question to T-Mobile themselves.
Okay. Because you're right, routing by location could mean many things, and that's probably a better question for T-Mobile. Rachel, if your question was not specific to T-Mobile, please just clarify your question for me, and I apologize if I made an assumption. Okay, so then the last one is, Can you say that again? If you are using an IP PBX-based service, will NG911 work?
You know, the answer is yes, as long as the IP PBX is in an area where there is an NG911 system. The good news is that many states have NG911 systems today. Because I live in Washington State, of course, my favorite is the one in Washington State. But there's a number of them around the country now. If you are in a state with a legacy system, you know, your call is going to get to 911. It will just be different. So location-based routing or routing by location can occur in two places. Can occur like T-Mobile is doing on the origination side, and can occur in the NG911 side. But really, NG911 needs origination carriers like T-Mobile to feed that location in to the NG911 service system. I don't know that I answered that very well, but
you're correct. So the next generation core services, which will, has a reliance on the GIS data provided.
Correct.
It can only do what it can do with valuable location information sent in from the originating service provider. So there are multiple partners in NG911 network.
Correct.
Okay,
yeah.
I will let you continue with your presentation, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, good, thank you. So I already expressed my excitement about T-Mobile routing by location. I already expressed my excitement about what Rapid SOS and Rapid Deploy are doing for dispatch location. And then B and C really in that bottom section there. Still, most calls routed by those predetermined sector assignments. And then dispatch location, where there isn't a Rapid SOS or Rapid Deploy, is being determined by the wireless carrier with what we refer to as phase 2 location. And so that's the data there. And let's see. Oh yeah, the exciting slide. See if I do this right. So our constituents, all of the people out there, average people, boy, they rely on their cell phone data, find their way around a city. Like I'm in the over the Rhine area in Cincinnati. I needed to have lunch. I have no idea really where I am. And so what do? I pop up my map. Where am I? I click the restaurants button, and there's like more than I could possibly eat at ever. And I pick one and I click walk, and I find my way there. So your average constituent, they expect their phone to know where they are because that's their daily experience. They check in on Facebook, and here's my favorite. They capture their Pokemon if they're gaming. All of these things. Like my wife, I have my location sharing on, and she can watch me when I'm walking around the neighborhood, taking a long walk. She knows where I am as I'm walking around. It's just kind of for fun and also very useful, and especially useful when you're trying to find a good place to eat, because that is the essence of life while you're traveling. So what are the opportunities to improve this? And we already talked about the great work T-Mobile is doing. I believe that others are doing some testing that is just not public. So we're definitely in the motion of gaining the promise of NG911 by the great work of the wireless carriers out there. So a recent article, in fact, this month, by the NENA Technical Issues Director in the call, titled "Reduce Response Times for 20 Million Calls" there. Basically, the punchline of the good, very detailed article is that the research bears out that location-based routing for 911 calls will save lives. I've heard in some of the statistics that that they believe there's 11 to 16,000 people per year that perish unnecessarily because of these types of routing issues that we have that are legacy that will get solved with location-based routing. And it's an important thing. That's what all of us want to do. That is that's success in our eyes is helping people out. That's why we're in this business. So again, I have a slide, a little bit of content that T-Mobile very nicely provided. So they are the first to launch location-based routing for wireless 911 calls. Great. Speeds emergency response times, reduces the need for call transfers, etc. The data that I heard shared and is okay to share is that some areas are experiencing up to 40% fewer call transfers. It's huge. Others, I'm going to share a little bit more about some other companies working to meet constituent expectations. As we talked about, constituents expect that their phone knows where they are so that when they are contacting and asking for emergency services, that their phone will be used to find them. Another company out there doing great work, Eli Technology, they have a technology called emergency mobile location, and it is getting vetted and tested out. But this technology provides dispatchable address, including like the floor, etc., of where that call is coming from. Very essential, and so that would be certainly a company to research, company to be aware of, because many of us live in cities, and for emergency location, we really need to have not just a latitude and longitude, but we really need to know which building and where in that building they are located. As well, a company called Carbine, again, focused on meeting citizens' expectations, the constituents' expectations. They're used to their phones knowing where they are. And they state it well here. The public expects communication with 911 via these common tools that are prevalent in life. And so they're focused on providing services to public safety that includes true, accurate, dynamic caller location, etc. So location data, again, really pounding it into the ground. It really enables first responders, for the right people to answer the call, and for especially for those like Rapid SOS, Rapid Deploy, getting the first responders to the caller. And punching it again, location for routing needs to be accurate enough to reduce transfers and enable incident management. Location for dispatch needs to be accurate enough to find the caller. So it's an important distinction that has been, I believe, confused for years, is that I've heard it a number of times myself, but we can't do location-based routing because it takes too long to know where the caller is. And yes, and many times it can take longer to find that, but that is really, you need that for dispatch. What you need for routing is just accurate enough location information to make sure that the call is getting to the best place to dispatch that help. And what are the opportunities for improvement that many of you that are GIS first responders, that are first responder telecommunicators, and it's exciting to see more and more states giving that designation. We applaud that. But what can you do now while we're waiting for location-based routing? There are routing requests, these pre-assignments of sectors to PSAPs. They come to your agency, sometimes referred to as wireless traffic plans, sometimes just call routing requests. They come in via email, their spreadsheets. The best thing that you can do, open them, answer them, complete them, return them in that 10 days. That is your first best thing to do. And as well, I would recommend requesting your audit data from Comtech, SST, Intrado, T-Mobile. Request it annually. Review it. Make sure that it is set up to route the way that you want it to route, and as well, you get to look at the alley display data and make sure it matches the SOP for your agency for that alley display. Where are we going? When we migrated from 3G to 4G, there was at least a 3x growth in the number of sectors. And I saw many agencies stop opening and stop responding to these routing requests because it was a lot of work. There was 3 times more sectors to review and respond to. As we're moving from 4G to 5G, hard to tell, perhaps 3 to 10x numbers of sectors. This is a focus area for my company. If you have questions, the email is down there as well. And of course, if you want to hear the joke about Imperial, that's the place to ask. So, in summary, and thank you for joining me, what have we covered? And hopefully you come away with, okay, now I understand why my agency is getting so many calls that we have to transfer, because these calls are predetermined based on the sector that the caller is calling from. And we as an agency will do ourselves a favor by reviewing that data and making sure that these decisions are correct, that we are actually getting the calls that we are best to dispatch for. We covered that. We covered the law. Hopefully that was new and interesting for you. We covered what are the deficiencies. We've talked about transfers, incident management, and the costs. There's other great responses to the why can Uber find me and 911 can't. I think of an article by Jeff Robertson, which is I think 12 or 18 months ago. It's a great article. And then what are the opportunities for improvement? The good news there is that it is starting to get better. So thank you very much for your time today. And I believe that we are opening back up for questions, Sandy.
Yes. So, folks, I know that if you do have any questions, I'm gonna go ahead and leave it open for a little bit longer. We did end just a little bit early. Dawn, I want to tell you, as you know, that I used to be a wireless administrator, both for my county 911 system and for my state. And the instructions that you gave folks on what they can do today is absolutely accurate. If we at a local level are not managing our wireless, then the company is doing it for us. The alley display that shows up, where calls are routed, if we're not going to participate in our own destiny, we can't get upset about the outcome. So I loved the fact that you had shared that as how we can embrace it and take control of our destiny to the extent that we can by being a participant in that outcome. I know that, so we had very clear rules about how that worked in my state. What we always recommended the annual audits, because not every change in your cell sector necessarily makes it past your desk. And so, or when one gets turned down, You may still have it within your database that it's active, but it's not there anymore, and nobody mentioned it to you. And those annual audits certainly do support that, as well as, like you said, responding to those wireless routing. So there is a couple questions. So Richard asked, is the PowerPoint presentation shareable? And if you would.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly will get I had to tweak just a little bit, and I'll get that final copy to you, Sandy. I'm assuming that will come from Datamark.
I'm assuming, but I'll check with Steph because she's really in charge.
Okay.
I'm just the van of the show.
Yeah, let me know. If Datamark would prefer that I respond to that, I will. Just let me know. But I'll wait for you. But certainly the deck is available, and then I know that a subcaptioned version of this recording will be available as well.
Okay, and Steph's messaging me as we speak, so maybe I'll have that answer before we leave. Another question that came in is there a manual on wireless calls? MANUAL.
I would look to, I don't know it off the top of my head, but I know that there are a couple of great, I forget what we call them, but they're operational guides on the NINA website. So maybe not technical standards, but they're operational standard procedures, and there's a wealth of information there.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so Sean says, don't keep us in suspense. Tell us a joke.
Oh, okay. Well, everyone blame Sean. All right, it's a pretty short joke. It's a historical joke, known pretty much only in Wisconsin. I'm sorry I don't have my accent anymore. I still say roof and crick, and my family makes fun of me, but I love the state. It was great. Anyway, so back in the early days of Wisconsin, of course, it was discovered by French explorers coming down through, Lake Michigan, et cetera, especially down through the Green Bay area. And as they were coming to land, which is, of course, very exciting for them, and they are approaching shore, the first one stepped out of the canoe and sunk down over his head and came up and said, "Wow, it sure is deep here." So I warned you, it's a groaner, but that's it. If you're a father, your sons and daughters will appreciate the dad joke there. So, all right, was that okay? Did everybody leave now?
No, folks are still hanging out. I have to admit, I'm surprised because you're right.
That's probably one of the worst jokes I know, but I have told it probably, and my wife's looking at me saying, yes, far too many times.
Yeah, well, you guys have probably been around or been together a long time, and she's probably heard it more than she wants to hear it.
Yeah.
So Stephanie said that, yes, we'll make it available to the attendees via download email. Okay. Downloadable from the email, and that the video will be available next week.
Okay, so I just had to correct like a couple of, like a verb noun thing, and
okay.
But I'll send out, I have that PDF, I'll send it to Stephanie today.
Okay, perfect. And we will make sure that before we distribute that's exactly what you want us to do, right? That we have the right information. Thank you so much, Dawn, for sharing this with us. I think what became apparent with the questions and during the presentation is that even though wireless phase 2 and the need for it was identified in 94 with with FCC 94-102, many just don't know how it works today.
And we're finding there are many, this has been around for so long, many have forgotten why the call routing sheets are even useful. And so hopefully we educated there. You can have a good level of control over your data and calls. And so I think that you summarized it very nicely. Thank you to you and to Datamark, and I appreciate Liz providing the ASL services. I hope that was beneficial.
Yes, thank you so much, Liz. Okay, so folks, our next session is Show Up, Defining Service Excellence in the Emergency Communication Center. It will start at the top of the hour at 12 Pacific time. This session is going to discuss service expectations of emergency communication center staff and how to ensure successful outcomes. I think you're really going to enjoy it. So there was one last thing in the Q&A. It was, where is the pier? Next to the lake? So we have jokers out there too.
I am going to add that to the joke from now on.
See, even the attendees end up impacting the outcome of what folks will see in the future.
All right, okay. I love it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. Bye. Thank you for attending.